As our nation this year marks the 250th anniversary of America's founding, we want to pause not simply to celebrate history, but to seek God, who gave this nation its purpose. On February 4th, that's next week, we're going to be coming together at the Museum of the Bible for the National Gathering for Prayer and Repentance. This event will bring together members of Congress, state leaders, evangelical leaders, and intercessors from across the nation. We invite you to join us. For details, visit ngpr.org, National Gathering Prayer and Repentance.org, ngpr.org. So last week, the Associated Press reported on an internal memo it had obtained that gives the go-ahead for ICE officers to forcefully enter a residence without a search warrant in order to make an immigration arrest. Now, in the memo, the ICE acting director, Todd Lyons, he noted that the DHS General Counsel's office had determined that ICE officers can rely on an administrative warrant of removal to enter a residence rather than a search warrant. Well, there's a lot of issues now. So it's interesting that, as we were mentioning earlier in the program with Senator Graham, there are some things that Democrats are asking for in exchange for funding the Department of Homeland Security. Some of this seems pretty reasonable. Joining me now by phone to talk about this, Andy McCarthy, a senior fellow at the National Review Institute and former assistant U.S. attorney for the Southern District of New York. Andy, welcome back to Washington Watch. Thanks for joining us.
Well, thanks so much for having me.
All right, so there's a lot of legalese here, but I think one of the things that people are seeing is a very aggressive enforcement of immigration law in Minnesota. All that's fine. A lot of people like that, and I think it's time that we enforce the law. But you don't enforce the law if you're kind of bending or breaking the law. Is all of this within the confines of existing law?
There's a lot of existing law on it, Tony, that may be brought to bear, but the bottom line answer is what they're saying they can do, probably they can't do, but the Supreme Court has never exactly weighed in on this. So the bottom, to be clear, for a very long time, the court has held that if you have a warrant for arrest, which has been issued by a judge, which means part of the independent judicial branch,
right,
then the agents on the basis of that warrant can go into the person's own home and arrest him. You can't go into a third party's premises and do it, but if you have a warrant for arrest with a person, you could go into his own place and take him out. What the Trump administration is trying to say is they should have the same ability with respect to an administrative warrant that's issued by the executive branch in connection with immigration proceedings. Now, I don't think it's a frivolous argument because what they're talking about is a warrant of removal, and you can't get a warrant of removal unless you go through a very elaborate legal process, which entails, at the end, an appeal to a judicial court. So it's not like the judicial courts don't have anything to do with it at all. But the Supreme Court has never said that such an administrative warrant is the functional equivalent of a judicial warrant, and that's what the confusion is.
So the reason that this is a contested issue is the Fourth Amendment of the Constitution protects people in this country from unreasonable searches and seizures. Now, I understand we're talking about people who are here maybe illegally. They've been deemed that they should be removed. But I think this is something that people have protected very carefully because someone should be rightfully protected in their home. But the separation of powers, as you pointed out, when you have the judicial branch, it's kind of a check and balance to the executive branch that is executing that warrant. So, I mean, when I was a police officer, I had to go to a judge to get a warrant to go into the home to arrest someone who I already had a warrant to arrest them, but I had the probable cause. I knew that they had committed the crime, but I had to get the arrest warrant from a judge. That was the oversight of the executive branch.
Yeah, that's all very correct. The thing is, as you know, Tony, in this area, there's always an exception that makes everything more confusing, right, or at least uncertain. And the confusion here is that if a police officer is acting in exigent circumstances. For example, in hot pursuit of somebody that you encounter on the street, even if you don't have a warrant at all, you could go into a premises and take the person out. So what the Trump people want to argue is, if you don't need a warrant at all in exigent circumstances, why shouldn't we be able to use an actual warrant that's gone through an elaborate administrative proceeding in connection with someone who's not legally in the country in the first place, which in their view is an exigent circumstance. I don't think most courts are going to think that that's an exigent circumstance, but I understand their point.
Right. But I would also, I guess, when you add in the political dynamics of what's happening in the country, that I would want to be very careful to do everything really right by the book, so that what I do is not being questioned. Yeah,
I think you and I are on the same page on that. If you're going to ask to do something that might be justifiable, but it's edgy, I think you have to give the courts a comfort level that you're exercising the powers that you do have in a responsible, unimpeachable way. And I don't think the best time to have that argument is when we've had a couple of incidents like we've had in the streets of Minneapolis.
Yeah, I don't think it doesn't help the situation. Andy, always great to talk with you. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you, Tony.